warm welcome to this special session on the Top 10 Emerging Technologies 2023. I'm Stefan Mergenthaler, Head of Strategic Intelligence here at the World Economic Forum, where our aim is to bring together the world's best research and analysis to connect the dots between strategic developments across industries, economies, and global issues. And the Top 10 Emerging Technologies report is a great illustration of this ambition. It emerged almost a decade ago out of our network of global future councils, where a very diverse group of experts started to explore the transformative impact of little-known technologies that have gone on to have global impact. For example, the precise genetic engineering tool CRISPR, featured in our 2015 report, went on to become Nobel Prize-winning science 5 years later, and is now being used in many fields, among others, to create insect and drought-resistant crops in harsh growing conditions around the world. mRNA vaccines, which were featured in our 2017 report, became the technology underpinning the majority of COVID-19 vaccines protecting lives worldwide. So we are pleased that now in its 11th edition, we could build on this great collaboration and bring in our colleagues at Frontiers Media, the leading open science publisher, who've been a great partner on this journey, and are even more pleased to be able to get together today in our headquarters in Geneva for this special briefing on the latest report. I will hand over in a moment to Dr. Frederick Fenter, Chief Executive Editor at Frontiers, to host what will be a fascinating discussion about the report, but also wanted to stress that we look forward to your active engagement and we'll be able to bring in some of your questions towards the end. So do make sure you put your questions into the Q&A box in Zoom. And you should also know that we do have a special collection on our strategic intelligence platform featuring all the 10 emerging technologies from the report, with dynamic updates on the latest research and analysis in all those fields. So make sure you explore those at intelligence.weforum.org. And with that, I now wish you a productive and insightful session. Over to you, Fred, and thank you again for the great collaboration.
Thank you, Stefan. And it really is all about connecting dots. And we at Frontiers, we're very pleased and very excited to be part of this adventure. As co-publisher with the World Economic Forum of the 10 Emerging Technologies of 2023, which was released at the annual meeting of the new champions in Tianjin. I just want to start by saying that at that meeting, at several points in the meeting, Professor Klaus Schwab emphasized that the theme of that meeting was entrepreneurship, and that word came up over and over again. And already in Tianjin, we were very, very pleased to see the report in action from day one by providing a conceptual framework that resonated across many of the discussions that were taking place in Tianjin. I just want to point out the fact that since this has been published, the report itself has been incredibly well received, with over 750 mentions in the world media to date, and the report itself has been viewed almost 50,000 times and downloaded almost 20,000 times. And so that's a real impact in terms of projecting and disseminating this important message about emerging technologies. Now, why has this report been so successful? I think that this resides very much in the methodology of curation and the network of experts behind the preparation of the report. The International Steering Group selected these 10 technologies from a larger list of 100 candidates, 100 contenders, and a college of chief editors in our Frontiers family of journals became directly involved with the preparation of each article, working with a strong emphasis on the multidisciplinary nature of all of the technologies that are described in this report. So the report has already successfully built awareness and excitement, and created excitement, first of all, around the role of emerging technologies in general, and at another level, on how we count on entrepreneurs to translate the knowledge generated in the research innovation cycle into industrial-powered solutions that will bring a real benefit to all of humanity. So I just wanted, before we get going, I'll just like to point out that today's session is sponsored by the Frontiers Policy Labs, which is a free-to-access online platform that has as its mission to bridge the gap between scientific research and policymakers. I am confident that that is exactly what we're going to achieve in today's panel discussion as we discuss together the implications of these emerging technologies on policy, on governance, and on society in general. So I'm just going to start now by introducing our panelists. We have with us today Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa Garces, an Ecuadorian politician and diplomat. Notably, she is the former president of the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly. We also have Professor Thomas Hartung, who is professor of environmental health and engineering at Johns Hopkins University. And we have Ms. Lina Pankhania, who is the artificial intelligence strategy lead at And Digital. So what we're going to do is jump right into the discussion, and I'm going to start with you, Thomas. You were involved in the preparation of the report. You contributed to the article on artificial intelligence and healthcare, and you also participated in the development of the transformation map that was constructed based on the content. And I'm also happy to announce that we published together your landmark paper on organoid intelligence earlier this year in Frontiers in Science. So my question for you is just simply, are we moving the needle? Are these publications creating a momentum, and how is this momentum playing out?
But I think we have to say this is the fifth industrial revolution which we are witnessing at the moment. People say data is the new oil. AI is certainly the new engine which makes something move out of this data. Healthcare is worldwide a mess. I think we are spending about 15% of our GDPs for this, and it desperately needs some solutions to get more equity, to get access to the best information. And I think we have really, especially with the focus on healthcare, we see at the moment that there is not one discipline untouched. And the topic is hot. We are organizing at the moment a Keystone Symposium to really get a bit of a landscape of what is happening. I'm most impressed. But most people, lay people especially, see at the moment only how we retrieve data, how these chatbots of ChatGPT, Bart, or Llama are getting information on a silver platter, which is really important for medicine and healthcare, also to get it to all countries in the world independent of the development of their own healthcare system. But there's so many more applications. We learn to communicate with AI, but we also learn to communicate with systems we never thought we might be communicating to. You might have heard that OpenAI's Muzero is communicating with every possible computer game. People are trying to communicate with animals, with whales, and we have started to communicate with human brain models. So we are exploring in an intercourse between AI and brain organoids how the human brain works. We are establishing memory, learning, and call this organoid intelligence, which was the topic of the Frontiers in Science article.
So Thomas, I just have a question to follow up on that. How do you think we should reassure the public about some of the implications of this rapidly developing technology? I mean, particularly when research touches upon biological intelligence, let's say, what type of message do you have to reassure everyone that we're moving forward at the appropriate pace?
That's a very important one. I don't believe really that regulation does work because it's far too slow. It's something which is doubling its capacity every 3 months over the last 10 years. You cannot control with whatever law. We cannot imagine next year's achievements. But what we need is strong ethical principles. It must not be allowed to impersonate somebody, which it is not. Yeah? But we have to enforce it. In the same way, working on brain organoids and their capacity to learn and memorize, that's hot ethical stuff. Yeah? For this reason, we have involved ethicists from the very beginning. We call this embedded ethics. So we are having them plan with us experiments. They come to our labs, and when they see these tiny little brain organoids, they get much more humble. They understand that something which has about as many neurons as a housefly will not be talking to them. But however, these are borders we can quite easily breach in the next few years, and we should be prepared for a dialogue what science may do or what may not do.
Okay, terrific. And just on a more general level, Thomas, where do you see the emerging technologies that are discussed in this report, for example? What do you see in 5 years? So how do you see some of these technologies, maybe particularly in the healthcare field where you were directly involved in the report? What can we expect from this technology that's exponentially developing, as you point out?
I mean, it's a young technology. We mainly need at the moment explainable AI. We need things where we understand why AI came to a conclusion that we humans in the loop can decide whether it makes sense or not sense. That's the most important development from my point of view. We will also have to work on the hallucinations of these methodologies. There's also always a trend to come to the most probable result. That's what the AI is working for, which means it will always give you mainstream answers, and only by hallucinating, it will sometimes invent something completely new. Which means humans are there for the creative part. We need the creativity of humans. And we should use the AI to complement us, to make our life easier. And I believe in the end, we will write science not with IE, but with AI.
Thank you, Thomas. I think this is like a perfect transition point, segue into a first question for Lina. You know, Lina, you heard a little bit what Thomas was saying. AI has truly come crashing into the public psyche, particularly with tools like ChatGPT. You're going to have to help us manage our expectations, particularly in terms of some of the statements that Thomas has just made. So, Lina, where is the line between hope and hype in the future of the solutions that AI or generative AI might bring to us?
Absolutely. So there is no doubt that Gen AI will transform the way that we live, the way that we work, the way that we approach the challenges that arise in the future. So it has the potential to revolutionize all types of industry, and especially, healthcare, climate, transport, some of our biggest issues that we face as humanity today can be revolutionized by AI. Looking at it from a sort of like workplace and future of work perspective as well, we're living in a time where across the board, a range of organizations, be it individuals, small and medium business owners, large corporations, they're all desperate to do more for less. And customer expectations are at an all-time high. So I think there is hope there. I think there is a lot that can potentially be done and a lot of problems that can be solved through the application of AI technologies. But what I'm seeing at the moment as I work with clients is people's perceptions of what AI can do and the assumptions that they make about it being this silver bullet that can fix everything, which isn't the case. So Thomas spoke about how it works on probabilities. So it's all based on the data that is inputted. So it can't always innovate. It doesn't have this capacity to kind of like create things always that are completely different and not based on things that have come before. So I do always talk to my clients with caution and try to kind of educate them on what is in the realms of possibilities and what is not possible. So lots of hope, I would say, but I would also treat that with a dose of caution. It's not a silver bullet. And we have to kind of like understand the problem that is trying to be solved, especially with clients, and understand if AI is the right route to go down.
Okay, Lena, thank you very much. The question I do have, though, in this space is about the future of jobs. How do you see the integration of AI actually improving productivity, or how is it going? What form is it going to take as we build the tools that people will be using every day in their work?
Yeah. So I'll be honest, I think the future of work is going to be AI enabled. So businesses across the economy are going to need to make changes in order to adapt AI technology. And in the future, I truly believe that the workplace is going to be alongside AI technology. So it's going to become as commonplace as things like how we use our emails and messaging systems today, right? So we have to adapt, and we have to learn these sort of like tech, data, AI skills in order to be able to progress in the workplace of the future. But then I think that the thing that isn't often spoken about is there's going to be an increased need for soft skills as well. So the more sort of like human skills that technology will be lacking, the way that we sort of persuade and problem solve and reason. So actually soft skills will be vitally important for the future, but as will those specialist skills to work with AI, things like, data engineering, data science, those kind of skills as well, in order to be able to utilize and implement the AI technology.
Yeah. So, and to follow up on that, among the people you talk to, do you see, let's say, apprehension in middle-sized businesses about being able to compete, to remain competitive in a fast-moving context like this?
Yeah, always. So I think that we have such a sort of competitive landscape at the moment. And like I said, the current economic and societal environment makes it really difficult for companies to grow and scale. But I think that it's not so much that, are they going to fall behind if they don't take on AI, or are they already too late? I think, again, it comes back to making sure that they solve the right problems through AI. So by no means is it that AI is going to be the competitive advantage, because they will have access to these tools. They will have access to these productivity gains and ways to optimize their operations and improve their customer experiences in the same way that other companies will have access to those things. But I think it's all in the application of ensuring that they solve the right problems, and that they don't just jump onto AI as a solution and sort of like spend their money in the wrong area.
Yeah, so the idea is not to get hypnotized by AI in itself, but really focus on the problems that need to be solved, and then use that as part of the toolkit in terms of taking things forward. Since the key word today is entrepreneurship, how do you see AI working in sort of the corporate R&D space in terms of driving forward innovation and supporting entrepreneurship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's vital. I think that at the moment, sort of operating costs are so high, and it's so difficult to thrive in terms of entrepreneurship and innovation. And I think that AI just opens up a whole new opportunity and landscape, not only to enhance productivity, ways of working, to save time, increase accuracy, all of those things, but also the types of areas you can innovate in have grown, and AI has definitely opened up those areas as well, so that it has both of those benefits in terms of ways of working and types of opportunities.
Thank you very much, Lina. I think what we'll do now is we'll take the discussion over to Maria. I have a first question for Maria, which I think is also a nice segue from this point about entrepreneurship. Maria, when I think about policy personally, I think about the attempt, the power to bridge gaps, to bring people together, to solve problems, to take things forward. The two gaps that I'm thinking about specifically in this space are the gaps between between entrepreneurs and their technological solutions and actual implementation of that technology. I think that there's a role for policy to play in that process. And then some of the questions that are coming across already are asking about the gap between the global north and the global south. So I'm wondering if you could just start our discussion this afternoon by saying a few words about the role of policy in these two spaces.
Well, thank you, Fred. And indeed, this science, technology, entrepreneurship connection really needs a clear policy, but also, clear investment and incentives, especially for the small and medium enterprises. The issue, and I think Lina was very clear in her message on the costs of operation, on the issues of access, on the issue of learning and knowing. And I think that there is an effort, first of all, to popularize and to have access to knowing the new technology and the difference it can make in terms of competitiveness, in terms of the needs for skilling and reskilling, but also in terms of regulatory frameworks. And this is the responsibility of governments, of parliaments, the issue of incentives, the issue of investment, the issue of partnership and blended finance, to make sure that especially the small and medium enterprises can enter the world of artificial intelligence. And your question about the gap between the North and the South, and of course, there are many dimensions to that. If I remember well, the World Bank's report on artificial intelligence forecasts that a surge, an increase of 500% of raw materials, for these new and sophisticated technologies. The surge in, for example, lithium and cobalt, basically really needs to increase at fast pace. And when you look at where geographically the concentration of these resources, most of the countries of this rare earth, as they call, are in the global south, in Vietnam, in Brazil, in Bolivia, in India. And of course, this raises concerns of supply chain disruptions and potential geopolitical tensions. We know that, for example, for wind turbines, for energy storage, for EVs, etc., these are absolutely critical, and that, of course, calls and requires to rethink governance models. I think that there is a responsibility to engage in responsible sourcing practices that benefit developing countries, that are connected or in the same pace as, for example, the needs to invest in sustainable development goals, in the fight against poverty and inequalities, etc., instead of triggering conflicts and exacerbating conflicts. We learned that the hard way, for example, for the countries of origin of fossil fuels, and I think we should not repeat the same mistakes. So green regulations, strong and clear regulations, and transfer of proper technology for extraction that are low in carbon and greener, for example, is extremely, I think, important. The second issue is the issue on intellectual property rights, and we haven't come to grips in terms of facilitated access to low carbon and green technologies on these issues. And of course, this harms the countries that have less technology development. Most of them are in the global south. So this requires to rethink the policy, to rethink the partnerships between the north and the south. It needs to rethink the job market, and I think that Lina already mentioned that about a potential displacement of jobs due to automation. And we need skilling and reskilling and adaptation mechanisms that benefit the South. And perhaps the last issue would be the access to digital resources. We know that almost half of the world is offline, and we also know that most of the new jobs, especially the new jobs connected to new technologies and artificial intelligence, requires that the world is fully connected and fully digitalized. And when you look at this inequality gap on access to the digital world, when you speak about women, it's even worse. When you speak about indigenous peoples or rural communities, the inequalities are even wider. So there is a lot of mind the gap affirmative action policy that needs to take place, and we need to also bring in the small and medium enterprises in these efforts. And I cannot agree more on the ethical oversight that is needed on preventive societal impacts that these new technologies might have. And with that said, we have to say that new technologies, these top 10 in this 11th report, are incredible opportunities that can change the world for the better. And we only need to have the policies rights, the proper regulations and protocols right, and to have access for all, and closing the gaps that I just mentioned. Thank you, and over, Fred.
Thanks, Maria. I think you in just a few words, you describe an incredibly complex landscape of IP rights, future of jobs, digital access, investment. And I think what the message I'm getting is that we have a lot of basic work that still needs to be done. And which takes me to the next question. You alluded very strongly to many of the points of the Agenda 2030 for a sustainable development. I think a lot of that was implied in what you've all just mentioned. But how do you see the role of emerging technology or sustainable technology in terms of reaching the goals that are described there?
Well, I think that Thomas mentioned, for example, the uses of these new technologies in the health sector. I think that can revolutionize, for example, universal health coverage and access to health services by disenfranchised populations if used well and in a democratic way. Let's look at climate change and the energy transition. I mean, these technologies can really make a difference to help countries deliver on their mitigation, but also on their adaptation commitments. And again, the elephant in the room is the issue of access, the issue of intellectual property, the issue of popularization and democratization. These are issues that really need to be reconsidered and rediscussed. Just thinking about the access to education, the closing of the digital gap. I mean, these are critical issues that are embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, I cannot just ignore one of the most important sustainable development goals, which is SDG 5, when we're talking about closing the inequalities gaps, facilitating access. When we speak about women, we are lagging behind every single sustainable development goal, starting by the eradication of poverty, by access to water and sanitation, for example, access to safe cooking fuels, for example, that more than 2 billion people cook with materials that are highly polluting and that are at odds with our climate commitments. And when you look at access to water, women, access to the digital infrastructure, women again. So there is a lot of homework ahead of us. We are a few days to go to the SDG Summit in New York. And there is a lot of conversation that is going to take place. And I really hope that the idea of artificial intelligence and new technologies is seen as a strong means, together with investment, to deliver on the 2030 agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Maria. I think what we're going to do is that we'll close the formal the panel session now, and we'll move to some questions. The questions are coming flying across. I'm not even really sure. The word that comes up actually quite often is the word democratize. There seems to be. We touched a little bit about the north and the north-south the divide, but. Maybe we can just try to do something around this word of democracy. I don't know, Thomas, does that resonate with you at all?
Well, absolutely. Actually, Maria has a lot of good points, but she sees the glass half empty, and I see the glass half full, probably. And the democratizing aspect, I think, is for me the most important one. ChatGPT has been rolled out in 2 months to 400 million people. Never has the technology reached more people instantly. You need nothing but a smartphone to connect to it and benefit from this. And I know in many of these developing countries, the people have nothing but a smartphone, because that's their lifeline to education, to knowledge, to all types of information. And I think the most important thing is AI is the answer to information flooding. The problem of our time is that we can no longer identify what is fraud, fake, what is correct, what is a meaningful source, and the people rely on their social networks instead, because they cannot identify quality anymore. AI is first of all a tool to make sense of big data, and this is what I really hail and appreciate, that I get wonderfully almost correct answers from ChatGPT and co, which is without reading 20 sources and judging afterwards which of these I trust most. So I really appreciate that this is a technology which is more democratizing than anything I've seen in a longer time.
Thank you, Thomas. Lina, do you want to have a comment to follow up on Thomas's remarks?
Absolutely, right. So it goes beyond that as well. It's not just access to information, but it's the way that people can now develop. So AI really emphasizes the use of low-code or no-code development environments. So that barrier to entry has been reduced. So you can sort of the programming skills that were previously required to develop technologies to drive small and medium businesses forward, to allow them to compete at scale, have been reduced, and they're now able to do more using some of these AI technologies. Also the fact that there's open source models, so there's a lot more access to these things, means that really more and more people are able to do these things. And like I said earlier, that's why there's more of an emphasis on those soft skills or the skills needed to use these technologies rather than just the technical skills, which is excellent. But as Thomas mentioned, sort of the UI on these things, it's so user-friendly, it's so easy to use. The take-up has been exceptional for that reason of this technology. So yeah, I think it's easier to access and it's easier to use, which means that more and more people can be effective through the use of it.
Thanks, Ina. Maria, I think we've heard very, very clearly your thoughts in this space. So I'm going to try to shift because there are a couple of questions coming across around the themes of risk or perceived risk and trust. And I think that's also a very, very interesting direction to take the discussion. So Maria, I don't know, from the policy space, how can you reinforce trust or sort of combat the perception of risk in this space of emerging technologies from a policy perspective?
Well, I would say that regulation in policy clarity really helps. There are already, several good examples in the European Union for regulation of artificial intelligence. I think that the risk of disinformation is also a real risk. And the issue of establishing mechanisms for properly curating the information that is out there. And I think that ChatGPT really helps on that front. And I think that public information on this issue is extremely important. Mm-hmm. The pedagogical work that is needed. And again, proper curation, clarity of policy, regulation, I think is extremely important. And the issue of going back to the issue of access, the open source models that are out there, I think really help. And sometimes when I'm asked what to do, to face artificial intelligence, everybody needs to be skilled and understand and work and operate and know what are the limits of ChatGPT, for example. And I say yes, but today more than ever, perhaps, we need philosophers. We need to hire the level of humans to deal with complexity, for example. And we need artists and creativity, perhaps more than ever. We don't want every single human being to be a top expert on artificial intelligence. We also need to ground all of this revolution into our human nature in a way. So again, the issue of values, the ethical oversight of all of this, proper regulation and access, I think these are issues that need to happen, considering the incredible, amazing potential, revolutionary potential of these new technologies and of artificial intelligence.
I think that you made that point. A good regulatory practice is a good way to build trust. So, Thomas, before I'd like to hear you, as someone working in the laboratory, really at the cutting edge. How does that resonate with you? This concept of public perceived risk and trust.
I mean, first of all, people have always been fearful of new technologies. There's reports of when trains were introduced, people said this is too fast for the human body and similar. Yeah? And other risks we have not anticipated. When I referred to oil earlier in comparing it to data, we certainly think of many things, but not of climate change. Yeah? So there's permanent learning around this. But the velocity of change here, I think, will not allow regulation. It will allow to establish principles and reinforce principles which we have anyway. And the big problem is it is a global movement, and we cannot regulate anything on the global scale. More than 70% of scientific articles are published in Chinese on AI. And also the number of patents out of China is about 60%. It's not necessarily that these are the best patents and the best articles, but there is a lot of things which are not accessible to the regulatory discussions of the Western world. And perhaps that's good. This Wild West we are observing at the moment, is an enormous moment of creativity. And we should be very careful not to suffocate this, but drive these developments. But with very clear ethical principles we have to reinforce.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. And if we had another hour, I would love to be able to take the discussion in the direction of to the extent to which we can use regulation in terms of building trust, and to what extent is it useful and necessary. But unfortunately, we're getting to the end of our discussion today, and I'd like to give each of you just 30 seconds. Please try to stick to 30 seconds just to make a final statement. And so, Thomas, we'll start with you again. Please, just 30 seconds. High-level impressions, please.
AI can only be as good as the data which are available, which means in the scientific realm, it is about open access. And this is about open access publishing. It's about fair access to data. These are the most important sources. And I think this then transpires into all our other areas. So we have to fight for openness.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. And Lina, over to you, please.
Yeah, sure. For me, it's all about the duality of the potential of AI. It's a versatile tool, and it possesses the capability to catalyze advancements that benefit humanity in unprecedented ways, as we've talked about in this discussion. But simultaneously, it harbors the latent ability to perpetuate harm and exacerbate inequality. So the opportunity here is huge. It can be an absolute step change to the way that we work, the way that we live, the way that we create, the way that we problem solve. Absolutely, yes. But it also has the potential to do mass harm and damage. So it's that potential of the duality for me that I find the most interesting. And we need to make sure that we regulate appropriately, that we upskill and reskill people so that people have an understanding on AI, and that we also run experiments and tests to make sure that we validate our understanding and that we're using AI in the right way going forward.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much, Lina. And Maria, you have the last word today, please.
Wow, the last word. I think that technologies are tools. We should not forget that, and they can never replace, human intelligence. And at the end of the day, technologies have to serve, a bigger purpose, and the bigger purpose is the well-being of the human family, and it is to reconnect and harmonize the relationship between human societies and nature. So I think that new technologies have indeed the potential to transform our own research methods, to advance progressive policy frameworks, to improve governance systems in a way that our societies are improved. The way we produce and consume is improved, and the way we care for other humans and for our environment. I strongly believe that this is an issue that should be addressed in the multilateral system. It's an issue of global concern, and it should be part of the agenda in the global decision making. And of course, I am a UN nerd, but I think the UN is a space to discuss these overarching policy frameworks, these overarching, ethical protocols, to use well the opportunities that the new technologies provide us with.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much, Maria. And I'd like to conclude. I would really like to thank everybody out there for participating in today's session. I very much thank the speakers. I have had really immense personal pleasure in terms of being able to participate in this discussion today. So thank you to the speakers. Emerging technologies, I'll just finish by saying, act as catalysts that fundamentally change our world, including research practices, policy development, governance systems, and to society as a whole. So if you're interested in learning more about the World Economic Forum Top 10 Emerging Technologies and how these will positively impact our lives over the next 3 to 5 years, please visit the website that they've set up for this. It's intelligence.weforum.org. And there you can explore the top 10 emerging, the collection of the top 10 emerging technologies. We're excited to announce that in the coming days, every transformation map in the top 10 emerging technologies collection will have a listen to overview function, allowing digital members and public users to gain a deep understanding of these technologies. This includes detailed explanations of what each technology entails, real-world use cases, and insights into their projected evolution in the coming years. So we extend a heartfelt thank you to the 10 experts worldwide who contributed to this enriching journey. Furthermore, we invite you to remain engaged in the upcoming week as the Frontiers Policy Labs will be sharing this session and 10 briefings on our YouTube channel. So please don't miss out on the opportunity to take a deep dive into these conversations, to gain insights, and to explore the frontiers of these advanced technologies. Thank you very much.